Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's discussion, today the Unionist perspective. We're going to talk about nations, systems, and spiritual choices. So basically, our discussion in our chat this week was revolving around the spiritual choices that we're seeing right now, and kind of a continuation of last week's or the past few weeks' discussion around how the choices that were made for decades are still impacting the countries today. And we're trying to see basically countries are as really complex individuals. So with emotions, with choices, with karma, with spiritual laws, and we're trying to understand what their choices would lead to in the end. And so right now we talked a lot about the different choices that were still present from the past decades in the last few weeks. And now we're kind of moving towards trying to understand how the choices of right now will impact the future. And we don't have a definite answer. That's why we have this discussion. But we're at least going to try and see what can come out of our discussion. And so we're going to talk about mainly China and the US with trying to resolve the debt right now, and probably also Senegal. And we'll have a little story about the choices for climate change, because we kind of mentioned the initiatives of the music group Coldplay, on trying to make new choices in that sense, while trying to live their fullest life purpose. So, what would you like to begin with, guys?
No. I feel China. Does any of you guys want to talk about China first?
Yeah. So Anja, you shared something about China, the automobile economy, and how the system is making new choices right now. Would you like to kind of summarize the article that you mentioned in our chat?
Yeah. I mean, it was pointed out that the article was a little vague towards the end. But overall, it was just discussing the current economic climate in China and kind of where it's headed. But, as I was reading that article, so overall, China has been going through a deflation phase, according to that New York Times article that I posted, which is, in contrast to some, Western countries that are experiencing inflation. So, the currency is weaker or has become weaker. There's a lot of problems with youth unemployment, slowing down of the housing sector, because China has built a lot, but hasn't necessarily completed projects, or those projects are completed, but they're not really in operation. So there's empty buildings. But then towards the end of the article, it was kind of an abrupt stop, and in that oh, well, China just feels like everything's going to be fine. We're going to forge ahead and things will be good. And so, Guru Jeff pointed it out in the chat after I posted it that, the article really isn't saying anything. And that's kind of why I posted it, because sometimes, this has happened before where we come across articles where they're getting at something, but not really looking at the full depth of it. And, I posed in the Discord chat that, maybe this is a reflection of the energy that's actually happening in China, where it's just kind of like, you know, they're just kind of saying like surface level, they're looking at certain things, certain like, you know, economic indicators, but they're not really like going deep into understanding why their, you know, currency may be deflating, why there is such high rates of unemployment and, you know, other social issues. And so, you know, we've talked about China, I would say a lot, like, you know, throughout our discussion. And I really feel like it just goes back to, and a lot of countries that we're talking about this week, I feel like they're in this place of like, they're kind of faced with certain issues and they have a decision of like whether they're really gonna face it and reconcile and kind of, you know, go deep into why these things are happening, or are they just going to continue with, you know, the sort of like current agenda and ignore things that may be calling their attention. So that's kind of what I got from it. I don't know if you guys got the same thing. So I would be interested in your feedback.
Yeah, I have to say, like, this is pretty common for me because I used to read geopolitical papers and books, especially around forecasting. And basically they were saying that there's no forecasts because like you can predict the future, but trying their best to kind of analyze how things were going to go. And then just saying like, oh, well, like we don't know, it could be anything, you know, and kind of going back to that plateau or middle ground. I'm not sure how this makes me feel. It kind of makes me feel wishy-washy as well. The feeling that I had is that, for example, 10 years ago, the books that I was reading in order to enter college were around how China's economy was boosting, basically thriving, but it was far from the US in terms of like economic and military power. It just had a lot more capital that it was investing in all of these different things and all of these different countries. And my teacher actually, my teacher at the time of history and geography made this comment that this couldn't possibly go on forever and the capital would probably crash and could end up in a bad deal or crisis. But the books were saying like, oh, well, China will not take over the world, or maybe not in like the next 100 years, but it'll be like, yeah, continue evolving, you know, or something like that. And literally almost said like, or something like that, you know, we don't know. And yeah, I realized that I was kind of like, nah, I don't like, you know, discussing things for hours just to say like, oh, I don't know, like, it kind of feels bad. But I also liked Jeff's input about it, is that we actually don't know how this is going to go until the choices of the countries are truly revealed. It's kind of like I equate a lot of my experiences and this discussion as well to like revealing a false twin flame or a true twin flame at the moment, just because it's so you just have to follow the thread until there is nothing to follow and the truth is revealed. And it kind of brought like some sort of comfort in my heart. It's like, you're not going to be able to predict anything, but you can discuss the different outcomes of what is going to happen based on how you feel like the choices lead to. Because I understand now that most countries are just like seeking peace, maybe seeking God, maybe in a misguided way. And we for sure know that some of these countries are making some misguided choices. and that it could end up badly. But we're not 100% sure, especially when the information of the country are not like 100% transparent as well. So we just have to see like which choice leads to which thing. Like we're not going to be able to predict karma and other spiritual laws, but we can try our best to like advise towards peace, and probably the less painful way to reach God for each individual and for each country. And for now, it feels like China is just like making its people suffer. And yeah, that's definitely not the choice that we would make in order to find the most prosperity. But it is their choice towards prosperity, is what we can say. And I feel that's better than trying to say like, China is doing X, Y, Z, and we agree and we don't agree, but we don't know, and whatever, how it's gonna go, like, to hell with it, you know. That feels kind of like dismissive almost. And yeah, maybe like it's a strategy from the media, like we begin something, we attract people to read our stuff, but you know, the work of investigation is not thorough, you know. So that's my feeling. But it's based on my personal experience, obviously. So I'm curious to know, like, how do you guys feel as well?
I mean, I like what you said about looking at these countries as individuals, because I kind of feel like that's what Jeff was kind of getting at, you know, like, because every country, just like an individual, they have certain personality, certain goals, certain patterns of behavior. And, you know, just looking at China, it feels like the thing that keeps coming up for them is, you know, are you going to choose to invest in yourself, or are you going to choose to kind of spread your energy outside of you? And so, and I think that's why it keeps coming up, because, you know, just like an individual, you're going to get to a point where if you're leaking all your energy out, it's no longer sustainable. Like something's going to have to change, you know, whether you like it or not. Like God's just going to do it, because that's like the law of, you know, the world. You know, there's balance, there's certain laws that are in place. And so I don't know if you got, if we were talking about China as an individual, I don't know if that's kind of like the sense that you're getting too. And maybe that's why the currency's deflating. And since they have this reputation of like, you know, especially from the West, like, oh, one day China's gonna like rule the world. And, you know, in a way, like they manufacture so many things, especially like in America, like everything is made in China. And so they do have a lot of power on the surface, but when you start looking at it, like where are they really putting their energy, and is it sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess like my feeling about it is like the same as what you guys have. It just feels unclear what the truth is, but I feel like the overall trend is what you guys have been saying, that China, as the collective kind of like, yeah, just focuses on the outside and doesn't really invest a lot on the inside, and its real estate market is still showing a lot of losses, you know, and people not wanting to invest as much, and also foreigners not wanting to invest in some companies more. So but it's really hard to tell though, like with that article we read, like yeah, I think you're right, it's a good example of just like kind of you could call it a bait and switch. Like it looks like the article was saying something definitive about China and like it's going to give you something, but then it just ends up saying basically nothing, like we don't know. And so it's not as valuable as perhaps an article saying like, why do we not know? Or like, what makes this complicated to know? And it kind of goes into that but it doesn't really like tell us very much. So I guess other than that, what came to mind too is that China, I know in the past, like China has intentionally, some other countries have done this too, but it has intentionally devalued its currency to make its imports seem like more attractive to other countries. So it has intentionally done that before. And that's been something that the US has kind of been like, don't do that. And China's been like, make me stop, just if you want me to stop, make me, but now like its currency is becoming is losing value in a way that I don't think don't intend. So I just thought that was interesting, because it kind of, I think that their own game kind of
Yes.
spirals out of control. Yeah, that's all I
Yes.
want.
That's true. I remember that from economy classes. Economy, like, so we did remember things from economy. It was like, there's like several ways to go about managing your currency, and one of those is like devaluing your money. And most of your professors would be like, don't do that. China is doing that, but it kind of feels bad. But also not like, because in the hopes of saving like academic neutrality, in some ways, like they would not pronounce themselves on, like they don't have a right to basically to pronounce themselves on like how this is gonna go bad for China if they continue to do that. We just say like, usually devaluing your money is an economic bad deal, but we don't know how this is going to happen. And so it does feel like I thought China had kind of stopped that, but it feels like it's just like gone headfirst into the devaluing path, and right now it's causing a huge deflation. So it was kind of something very attracted. Yeah. So if we go out of the academic way of doing things, which is good, it's good to have that academic feeling as well, and neutrality and reflection. It's supposed to be a reflection, and we're going to a spiritual part of it. It definitely feels like they attracted this to them, and they did this in the hopes that, oh, it will be fine and we'll be able to stop when the time comes. But I feel like it's like with all of our crises, especially like climate change as well, it's usually like it'll be fine until it's not, and we're not going to stop if we see that there's still like a job that we can just like milk out of a system or of Earth, in global consciousness at least, and so yeah, we just have to see, because we're not at the end per se of this crisis, but people have been warning us about like how it's like huge bad deals for us to go into them. So there's this feeling of like the truth will be revealed, but we don't know how. And I don't know, feels like it's causing kind of an anxiety in me, but also as well, like I feel there's something about like a spiritual lesson in just like trusting that the truth will be revealed in time. And there's something about like this huge question, like the elephant in the room is like, are we choosing destruction of our planet in a sense? And from Yogananda's point of view, we're not choosing destruction of our planets, because our planet would already be dead if we did that. And so there is this reassurance that we're choosing life as a whole and peace. And it's going to still evolve like that, and there's going to be a future, like a few years still to our planet, not just 100, but like a few thousand millions. But for now, reality seems like it's not going in this way in some places, economic and environmental. I can pronounce that name. So in terms of climate change. So I wonder, like, how will the truth be revealed? Like, when is, like, what is enough for people? When do they feel like it's time to go the other way around? Well, when would China feel like it's time to go the other way around? And maybe there's something in, like, it feels like we're dying, and so we're going to learn our lesson and come back around and kind of like go to a more peaceful way of doing things. And that's probably what we would do as individuals. We would like go through almost like near-death experiences and then come back and transform our lives. If it was like a person, you know? And maybe that's what's going to happen. Like, it's going to be like not a progress through like easy, flawless ascension, but a progress through like spiritual lessons, however painful they are. If we're choosing like peace and sustainability on our planet. So yeah, I don't know how, like, what do you guys feel? It feels like it's going through like we're going deeper into feelings more than like very logical concepts, I guess. So what's your feeling on this?
As you were talking, I was just wondering, and I feel guided to just ask, what is the core upset with China, or even any of these other countries, you know, that we, like Thailand is having also some shifts, I guess, in leadership. We're seeing shifts in leadership with Senegal as well. You know, Uganda with the issues and the controversy with the LGBTQ laws, anti-laws. And so overall, there just seems to be a theme of like a push and a pull, you know? I don't know if you guys get that. And so do you feel like every country has just a different core upset, or is there a similar thread running through all this?
Interesting. I definitely feel like we're pulling on a string. So that makes sense, that push and pull energy that you're feeling. I'm not sure if every country has the same core upsets, because like there's still different consciousness, even though we have a global consciousness. It's kind of like the same as individuals, like they wouldn't have the same core upsets to harmony, strength, and union, you know? I do feel like Thailand and Senegal are on separate ends of a spectrum. That feels very similar in terms of like choosing democracy. I'm not sure China is on like a democracy spectrum yet. They do have some of that, but like it's not like, doesn't feel like the core block just yet. Or maybe it is, but they have many layers to it before they're after it. So what would you say? Like Sage, like I feel like you had something to say, but also Anja.
I do feel like there's some common thread, and I feel like it's just healing between all these some of these stories that we were talking about. And I feel like it's about poverty and knowing that you have value to create, to give, that you're divine. And I think the lesson is that you can't get something for nothing, because so obviously with China has used a lot of manipulative or kind of dishonest practices to try to grow its economy. And part of it has been legit, partly, but a lot of it is like built on a really sandy foundation. So yeah, so I feel like that's true with China. Like you can't get something for nothing. You have to like provide real value and know that you have something and you are something. And then with the US, with the debt ceiling issue, like, so, you know, the country has kept like raising and raising the debt limit or suspending the debt limit for a long time. And that means the US keeps like borrowing more than it is taking in, like the government has been. Yeah. And so that's also a question of like, that begs the question of like, well, when is this going to stop? You know, like, when is the country going to have a surplus with its yearly budgets to have a deficit and really try to address that? And then I think too, even with Senegal, like I feel like in general with authoritarian leaders or dictators, I don't know if you could call that guy a dictator in Senegal, but definitely authoritarian because he like jails anyone who disagrees with him often. I feel like it's similar because I think often people see these authoritarian rulers as kind of like folk heroes who are almost like semi-divine. And well, we're all divine, but like often people, you know, they see like this person is divine and like we're not. That's what I'm talking about. And that this person is our hero and they'll raise us up from our conditions of whatever it is, problems. They'll lift us out of our problems. And it's this person, and that's why like they can stay in power for so long. So I feel like that's kind of a common thread. It's that feeling like, you know, something you'll magically have progress, but without putting in the real effort or the real love to get it, you know. And I feel like the US is in a way has that sometimes too, because if you're always like borrowing more than you're getting, than the income that you're getting, it means that you're like, yeah, like, you know, business is booming, growth is going to keep continuing, this debt is no problem, we'll take care of it. But it's like, yeah, but like the money that you're taking in is never more than the money that you're borrowing. So you're kind of like taking from yourself instead of like loving yourself there, you know what I mean? So that's what I felt was the common thread. But yeah, it doesn't tie all of the stories together, but I feel like it's kind of a similar similarity there. Yeah.
So poverty and power, basically. That's interesting. Like I would say for the US, I feel like a lot of countries do that to some extent. But there's something about the US where they'll have less restrictions to forgiving debt than the countries of the European Union would have, for example. So the countries of the European Union will have like the European Central Bank that is forgiving debt, but with very strict conditions sometimes, depending on the country and the health and how much like surplus they can provide in the matter of like the next few months to 6 months to a year after the forgiving of the debt. And so it's less, it still happens, like a lot of countries do forgive debt, but it's like less important than the US, where I felt like there were less conditions to forgiving debt. And Trump definitely did that for COVID in a certain way, where it just like forgave the debt. Even when the American Central Bank said that maybe it was not the best time to forgive all the debt right away in 2020. And so, yeah, that's also a spiritual lesson for them. And Senegal, like, we can choose which one of the stories we can talk about next, but for Senegal, there's definitely something where in a lot of countries, people see a new person as their deity or savior. And I would agree that it's a person that brings change, and it's a person that agrees maybe with a part of the population's ideas for change and progress and peace. But it's not that easy, and it's not like about like putting your whole power on someone, definitely. And there's also something very surprising with Senegal, and we can go deeper into that, is that it was definitely like the example, like the leader in democracy for a lot of years, seemingly for African countries. So to see that protesters are being killed and tortured in the streets, and a lot of people are being jailed, they disappear, it's very surprising. And maybe it speaks to like, it shows democracy a little bit, but maybe the core wasn't really like healed, which is still surprising again, because like since their independence, like Leopold Sédar Senghor was the president, had done his studies with like French Nobel Prizes, is the Nobel Prizes, it's himself. And so the story of that would say that since the 60s and up until now, like Senegal was like very democratic, with like not a lot of upsets in its history of independence. So yeah, but there is definitely a core that's still like choosing something else. So US or Senegal? What's next? Zaire seems deep in thought.
I don't know.
I couldn't find the US article. I was even going through, was that just me?
I haven't seen a lot about it either.
Okay. We're talking about the debt ceiling, right? Okay.
Yeah, so it's a continuation. I don't know, were you there last week? I don't remember.
Oh, I missed it. I take my mom to the airport.
Oh yeah, that's right. So the original article, and seemingly the only article that we found, was that the president and the leader of the Republican Party joined forces to talk about like debt and how to stop a crash of the economy and the accruing debt that there is. And so basically it was just like a joint force to say like, whether we agree or not on our, in terms of politics, we're going to compromise, and we're going to not go over that limit in order to manage the economy of the country, whoever's in power. And yeah, that was it. And we had a little bit of a discussion around that, mainly around politics, I guess. Like, we were more concentrated on political choices last week, and mainly around like why people would compromise. And there's a part that felt good about like them joining forces, because this is really the truth of it. It's like there are two coins of the same consciousness, which is the country's consciousness. But also that it seems like a lot of like political outreach from the Democratic Party had led to this forcing them to like kind of compromise on many of their ideas at the moment, which is maybe a story for another day, but this was it. And then I think Sage can confirm that we didn't see another article about this, but we really wanted to go deeper into the story, because this was the last story that we talked about last week.
Okay. Now I vaguely remember reading something, and I feel like I had the same feeling about that article. Like, it was kind of vague.
Yeah.
About the US debt ceiling. And, I just feel like we're always talking about the debt ceiling. I don't know if Sage and Isaiah, you get the same, but like, whether I feel like it's a yearly thing or maybe every few years, like, oh my God, the government's gonna shut down, we're gonna default. And I think last year, a few years ago, like it did, like the mail wasn't going out, like it literally came to a halt for a little bit. So I don't know, I kind of get the same energy as China. Like there's just like something that maybe isn't being looked at or isn't being looked at deeply enough. And like Yurine, you mentioned, going deeper. So maybe that's the whole issue, like the fact that the US isn't going deeper and like really looking at this problem. And it's just like a perpetual elephant in the room. That's just like what it feels like. It's always just there. But what do we do?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I don't get it. A lot of the debt too that the US has is actually the US is really indebted to China, actually, because I think China's like the biggest single buyer of US government bonds in the world, which is like really, it's kind of humorous and problematic at the same time, because it's just so, I don't know. I just don't know. Like you can't, it's hard to be like, oh, I owe you a bunch of money, but I also disapprove of your economic practices. You know what I mean? Like if you are in debt to somebody, you can't really tell them, like if you're in a lot of debt to somebody, you can't really tell them, by the way, like your economic practices are pretty unsound. Because they just don't. But I know that like countries borrowing money from each other is like a normal thing, and borrowing like large quantities. But like for the US, like it always, and I don't really know a lot about the other countries' debt issues or lack thereof. But for the US, like the debt has always been rising, and so I think that in American consciousness, it's people feel numbed out there. The populace feels really numbed out because it's just become normal for us, and it has been for a long time, to accept we have an ever-growing amount of debt. And this is fine. This is fine. Because I feel like it's because there's almost a level of like, well, America is a very optimistic country, but it could even edge toward arrogance, because you're kind of saying like, well, our growth is unlimited, and like we're the greatest country ever, and we're always going to get more money and growth, and it doesn't matter if we keep racking up debt because it's all going to go away, or it doesn't matter because we're powerful, and our creditors don't matter. It's just like I don't understand it, but I feel like it's kind of just being numbed out and like kind of ungrounded, because it's like you went from being optimistic to being like a little bit ungrounded, so yeah. But
Yeah.
it is good that the US has optimism and is very like entrepreneurial and is always like finding new ways to grow and expand and stuff. So that's good. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, it feels like, I feel like it feels similar to China because it's like that same fear of poverty that we talked about before with them, that I feel like the US is feeling as well. And like that's the thing that really has to be faced, is the poverty and that fear, I think. And it's interesting too, Sage and I were talking about it, how um they agreed to like run a pipeline for gas, for more fossil fuels through West Virginia. It's just like, what are you doing? Wait, we can't do this because we don't want our planet to burn. What is happening? And it just feels like it's that it's that fear of poverty again, because you wouldn't do that because we know that how bad that is for our planet. if you like, if you weren't afraid of that poverty, and like, fossil fuels is right now, unfortunately, there's still money in it. I hope that changes very quickly though, because we needed to. But yeah, it feels, it feels like that same thing. And yes, we must face it, face the fear.
Yes.
You almost make me feel you make me remember like the memes about the US of like when there's oil somewhere and then the US and like bah! And so and then when the situation gets back, like retreat, abort mission, and so that just made me think of that. I was like, why is the US so obsessed with oil? Like I know it's a rich country, it wants to have shares in oil, okay, but like, geez, calm down. Even before you mentioned the arrogance, Sage, I was thinking about people as individuals. And the thing with like the US is that there's a lot of like entrepreneurship is like encouraged, and being risky, even if you fail, is being encouraged and recognized in the country even more than honesty and hard work. It's like a success, it's very much in the consciousness of our country. That's what the American man was talking about to a Japanese man as well. I didn't get it at the time, but it's like that, like everything, like even in the media, like you watch documentaries about the US and like people are very much like risk oriented because they feel like, oh, we can do that. And if we fail and go into debt, that's okay, we'll manage, And so it's no surprise that the country is doing the same. And there's something about like, maybe people are being too risky sometimes in the terms of like, we'll manage. And that was exactly what I was thinking about. It's just like that Silicon Valley / Hollywood / even New York type of like growth and being business oriented, going to all the glittery thing, like the shiny things, and just taking an opportunity there, even if it's probably sometimes for some people too good to be true. And yeah, I don't know how this is going to come out for the US. And I feel like a lot of people have been able to come out of it winning, even if they failed several times. So it's in the consciousness that we need to continue, even though like it's kind of risky. And I think that's what they're doing with their debt to China. Like, oh, this won't hurt us because we're always going to come out on top. But like, if we go into like a global crisis because the economy of one country is going down, and this goes beyond default, like defaulting like once every few years to try to like save part of the debt, because this is still like a partial debt dealing, the defaulting. It's not going to resolve everything. It's just like a little thing, even where it seems big. Like the US is going to be impacted and maybe worse than 2008. The thing is, like, since 2008, they've been defaulting like a lot of times and having things with China. And it's good to have the discourse by China maybe is dangerous, but like, if you're not following afterwards, like, why would you not like settle your debt quickly so that you can get out of a rotten deal, like rotten deal? Obviously, like most of the commercialization of the world comes from China, so you're going to have dealings with China, but don't have debt with China. Don't you see what is happening right now with everything shutting down and then not forgiving debt to like African countries? And so maybe that's where the arrogance comes in, like, oh, like we're risk takers, and it's always worked out like we're going to come on top yet again, or maybe we have a better deal because we're more used to it, like we're entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of the world. That feels good. That feels good to some extent. It really does, but maybe not. Again, like the question, like where's the limit? It comes around again, and yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, I just feel like the interesting thing is too that again, like it's never mattered what political parties had control or of the US. It hasn't mattered like in the entirety of the 20th century and also the 21st. Well, since the Great Depression, like the debt has like gone up all the time. It doesn't matter who is in charge. And so, and even though like, the Republican side is more like we want to cut government spending and make government small and like everything like that. And the Democrats are usually painted as like the big spenders, but it really has been all the same throughout. And I feel like the reason we've had ever-growing debt is because there's very little political will in America to be like, hey, you guys, like we need to live within our means. Because I feel like to the American consciousness, that would feel like very bitter medicine. And people would feel like disillusioned because a lot of America is very much fueled, the USA is very much fueled by this feeling of like, we're, like the richest country and the best and ever progressing and ever growing and just, infinite, which is like partly, like you said, divine, because that is the truth for all of us. But you have to like really accept where you are. You can't become ungrounded and totally and dissociate from where you are. It's just like, I feel like the economy and people might feel really like a lot of like fear and, and upset and disappointment might come up if people are like, no, like we have to live within our means. And they're just like, what do you mean? What do you mean? We're America, we always have money. Yeah.
Right. It's like I think like most people that come from outside, like first time I went to Florida, for example, everything screamed wealth, but also everything screamed like leaking your energy as well. And I couldn't word it at the time, but it's almost like very opulent, but opulent to a point like, where does all this money come from? Because even like the middle class, you're spending like your week gross, like, and what the hell, And, sorry, but like it's just the thing that came to mind. Just like because like request those video clips on Miami Beach, and basically the thing is, I would say like first of all, like an individual, they get rich not because they earn a lot. Yes, first part to that, like definitely like creating value. The US is good at that, but it's also like an individual like is doing smart things with its money. And are we doing smart things with our money right now? Because it feels like not at all. And in terms of government, I would say there's definitely an element of like reality is dense on Earth, and so like the choice to change is not going to have effects immediately. And so if you don't keep at it, you're not going to be able to see much changes. And so yeah, it would be like, would the economy be ready? Like, would people be ready to like be financially safe for like 2 to 3 years in order to have an eternity of prosperity afterwards? I don't know, because most of the human brain is geared toward instant satisfaction. And there's also something about like, oh, well, but the president that was before me, there was less of a crisis at the time, so they had to spend less, and so we have to spend more. but we'll catch up later. And then the next president does exactly the same thing. Oh, but there's more of a crisis, so we have to spend more, but we'll catch up later. And it always comes back to it. It's always the same. Like you see it in companies. You see it as there's definitely like I guess what I'm saying is there's definitely this number of like the next person will do that for me, and I don't have to take care of it, which we healed a lot actually. Being around this community, like don't be numb, don't be apathetic. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of things in certain countries. It's going to look different, be different in different branches of the system, but there's a lot of apathy to changing and to actually making the choice to like go deep. And maybe it's going to be uncomfortable for like 2 to 3 years, but afterwards it's going to be, quite well.
Yeah. We need like a meme president that no one likes.
Yeah.
That or like a meme Congress. They like, yeah,
know.
like, oh man, why do you have to do this? They're like, yeah, they would have like a 5% approval rating. It's okay.
Yeah. And so Senegal. Yeah. Down.
What can you expand more, Irene, about what you're saying? How Senegal was kind of a beacon of democracy in Africa earlier, and how that's changed.
I don't know
What-
if it is the democracy, but it was seen as a beacon of democracy. It was very safe to come to Senegal. It was a cultural center. Definitely a good place if you were rich, if you wanted to invest, even though some of the population is still poor. It was definitely good. Like up to like 2 months ago, you could go to Senegal very, very safely. It was seen as like it was stable for like 50 years. 50 years of stability, so people felt very safe, whether they were from outsiders or whether they were in the country. And I got to go. I have family there, and I had the same feeling. It's very safe. It's nice, Obviously, there are things that need to evolve, but it is safe, and it's going towards like progression, catching up with like developing countries, other developing countries, with Europe and things like that. The thing is, like, I guess what we realized not long ago is that there's a lot of a system that needs to still come to be independent from France and from post-colonialism. And the opponent to the current president was representing that. So was representing like choosing prosperity, not like tradition and austerity, but choosing prosperity still, but doing that in the way that it would come up as like Senegal being the focal point, the focus of the politics, like being rising up culturally, basically, and in all parts of the system. And so it actually felt like maybe a little idealistic, maybe a little fast, but there was also something very grounded in like, we're going to do the same thing to all the branches, we're going to rise up step by step. I guess that's when the people thought of him as kind of a deity, like he's going to save us and change the things. And then he was brought to justice for rape, but it's basically like, it's almost pretty much clear that the person was tipped up by his opponents to kind of have false accusations on him. And so they changed the trial at the same time as the trial, for the trial to be about him corrupting the youth, corrupting the youth, basically, with his new ideas, which doesn't make sense at all. And so that's it in a nutshell. 50 years of like seemingly stability and evolving, and it seems like the democratic progression was there, and it's just going to be democracy will elect this new person that will keep on making Senegal evolve, and it was just going to be that, but then all hell broke loose. So how do you guys feel about that in the last few minutes that we have?
I don't know, the only thing really standing out to me, because once again, I feel like there was just like a very similar theme. And now the more we talk about it, I almost wonder if it partly has anything to do with just, really like investing in yourself and your people. And because, every country we've talked about, there's issues with youth being unemployed or just having, issues around unemployment. That's apparent in China. In the US, I don't know if it's just necessarily youth, but there's always conversations about the job force and unemployment, and Senegal as well. And I feel like your country is only ever as prosperous or healthy as like the workforce is, and like how much you put into that. And with Senegal going through what it's going through, like to me, it just sounds like almost like there's a feeling of desperation among a certain section of the population, specifically maybe younger people or people that are just like over the old way of doing things. And I don't know, for Senegal, it does feel a bit different because, they were colonized by France, if I'm not mistaken. And so I don't know if that also has something to do with it. Just kind of, I feel like Senegal, I'm getting a more of a like we're figuring ourselves out sort of energy. I don't know if it feels like a lot more younger. I don't know how to explain it, but it just feels like this youthful, like we're just kind of figuring our stuff out because we had this big parent over here that was kind of controlling us, influencing us, maybe in ways that we really didn't want to. And now that they're more of an independent country, I feel like maybe there's some things there that kind of needs to be reconciled. So I think you mentioned like it might be a good thing what is kind of happening in Senegal, because it doesn't feel like it does with China or the US, where it's just like some reoccurring thing that isn't being looked at. I just feel like this is like them figuring out who Senegal is and where they kind of want to go forward in that.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, that's probably it. It doesn't feel like a deep-rooted thing. It feels very new. Again, we could be mistaken. We're probably going to have more information on it as the weeks pass, but it's definitely going to be interesting to talk about it more because it feels similar, and I could go on about like how it feels similar, but also different, I would say. But we are at the hour, so we're definitely going to continue this next time. Thank you to everyone who watched us live or from YouTube. And if you watch from YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Church of Union channel so you can see all the interesting discussions on spirituality, politics, and other things coming up your way. And yeah, have a good day and bye-bye.
Bye.